Hello, and welcome to my presentation on how does food insecurity affect the growth and development of children. A few definitions before we get started. Food insecurity means or can be defined as the limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods within the home. A household, a home, a house is a structure with at least one person living in it. For the sake of this research project and this presentation, there is no required minimum number of people that need to live in a home to be considered a household. A diet is the foods that you eat in a day. That means you may eat an apple, a cucumber, and a bowl of cereal in a day. That is your diet for the day. It does not mean that we are restricting our foods in any way or that we are eating in a way to lose weight. It is our diet for the day. Children or child is a human under the age of 18. Hunger is the uneasy or painful sensation caused by lack of food. And development is the natural sequence of growth for children. So here's my why. I chose this topic because I love to eat. I'm an emotional eater. I eat when I'm happy, I eat when I'm sad, I eat when I'm angry, I eat if the weather is changing. Food is my comfort tool. And to think that people, especially children, do not have access to food hurts my heart. Second, food is a basic need. We need food as humans to live. We need food as an animal to live. Third, I teach low-income families, and I've watched them struggle to provide healthy food to their children, food that is going to help them grow, food that is going to help them come to school ready to learn. And my last why is, what can I do to help food insecure families? Is this going to be an easy fix? What are the statistics in my community where I live and teach? Is it worse than other communities around? How are we going to work together to provide healthy, nutrient-rich food to our growing children in our communities? So what did I expect to learn? I expected to learn that families in urban communities, such as those communities closer to Grand Rapids, struggled with food insecurity at a higher percentage than rural families. I live and I teach in a rural community. I expected to learn that households with children have more food insecurity than households without children. I expected to learn that racial minorities have more food insecure households than white, non-Hispanic households. I expected to learn that food insecurity impacts the physical development of children. If you don't have food, how are you going to be able to grow? I expected to learn that children living in food insecure homes had more learning disabilities, more cognitive learning disabilities than those children in food secure homes. I expected to learn that the community I live in has several resources for family to access food when needed. And blindly, I expected that food security in my community is not a problem. Well, come to find out, we'll learn more about that later. So what did I learn? Here are some raw facts. In 2010, 14.5% of American households were food insecure. The United States has the highest percentage of food insecure homes than any other developed country in the world. Food insecurity is experienced by 21% of households that have children living in them. The most vulnerable homes for food insecurity are those headed by females, in particular the Black and Hispanic females, and households living under the national poverty line. 40.3 million people in the United States use the federally funded food assistance program. There's two big programs in the United States. They are the SNAP, or in Michigan, we call it the Michigan Bridge Card, and WIC. Food insecurity remains one of the most important issues related to public health in the United States, yet receives very little public or political attention. The Department of Health and Human Services has adopted a goal to increase food education for those receiving food assistance. Cognitive development. Cognitive development relates to the brain, how we learn, what we learn, when we learn. So here is how food insecurity or the lack of food in a home impacts children cognitively. Many studies show that children are cognitively aware of the lack of food in their household. And at the same time, they are aware that the food available to them is not of high quality. Can you imagine at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, knowing that your home does not have nutrient-rich or enough food to eat? Or if you wake up in the morning, there may not be that bowl of cereal for you. Let that sink in. Another fact in regards to cognitive development is that children 6 to 11 years old and living in a food insecure home had lower math skills or scores than same age peers living in a food secure home. That same study shows that the same age group is more likely to be retained or have to repeat a grade due to poor academics. Another study by Johnson and Markowitz state that food insecurity in the early years, infancy, toddlerhood, preschool, is linked to poor academic performance starting in kindergarten. Food insecurity impacts cognitive skills such as attention span, persistence, and an eagerness or desire to learn. Physical development is how we move, from how we walk to how we hold a pencil. Physical development impacts our learning. Children that live in food insecure homes are more likely to visit the emergency room and be admitted. For example, if a child living in a food insecure home is not drinking milk, they are not receiving or getting their daily dose of calcium. Calcium is needed for proper bone growth. And if you're not getting that calcium, your bones are not going to grow, which means they may be weak. And a simple fall to someone drinking their milk every day could mean a broken bone for that child that is not drinking their milk every day. Children living in food insecure homes had worse overall health by a difference of 2.5%. Children living in food insecure homes had a greater chance of developing asthma. Children living in food insecure homes were more lethargic, meaning sleepy, tired, and had a decrease in overall activity while at school. Again, if you're hungry, if your body is feeling hunger, you're not going to be engaged in what the teacher is teaching. You're not going to be engaged with a group of peers that want to go play on the playground because you just don't have that energy from food stored. There is some mixed data on whether food insecurity leads to obesity. Some studies show that when a child is in a food insecure environment and they get access to food, they'll eat everything they can. Then their body just stores all of that. So if they're only eating once a day and their body is storing all of that, they may maybe become obese. The other thought on that is that most likely these children in food insecure homes are not eating the most nutritional food. A box of macaroni and cheese is $1.25 at your local Dollar Tree. And if that's healthy, that's okay. But there are other options available. You could have whole grain, homemade, low fat macaroni and cheese. But that's going to cost more. Plus, you might want to have apples with that, or carrots with that, or any other fruits and vegetables. That's not an option for food insecure homes. So because they're not getting the best nutritional value out of their food, it leads to them becoming obese. Again, there's not a lot of research out there right now, and the research that is does not agree. So we're just going to leave that as is for now. Social emotional development. That's how you feel, identifying feelings, what you're thinking, who you're thinking it with, building relationships. And of course, living in a food insecure home affects that development as well. A study completed in 5 large cities in the United States showed that children in food insecure homes had a negative association with meal times. These 5 large cities, I know, were Boston, LA, Dallas, big, urban, highly diverse cities. Infants and toddlers in food insecure homes may not seek out social interactions with caregivers, leading to social isolation and delayed social skill development. For example, if an infant is not getting fed as often as they should, mainly formula fed infant because the family can't afford the formula, and maybe breastfeeding is not an option for that mother. Let's say they were adopted or a foster family, or the mother just may not be able to produce milk. So back to that infant who's not being held every 2, 3, 4 hours, getting a bottle, making that eye contact with who's feeding them. I know when I fed my babies, I would sing songs to them. I would tell them what's next in our day. They're not getting that foundation. And without that foundation, it could lead to delayed social skills later in life. Howard L. in 2011 states that food insecurity impacts forming friendships, identifying and expressing feelings, self-control, real-world interactions. If you're hungry, if you're feeling hunger, you're not going to want to be around other people. You're going to be isolated. You want just to be on that swing, thinking about when you're going to eat next. You may act out with challenging behavior because you're hungry, you want food. You may not know how to interact with people because your family stays home all the time. You don't have that extra fun money to go out to a movie, to learn how to act in a movie theater. You may not know what it's like to go to a fast food restaurant and buy a Happy Meal. You're not going to have that basic foundation for social emotional development. In teenagers, food insecurity leads to an increase in mood disorders, behavior disorders, substance abuse, mood disorders like anxiety, depression, behavior, ADHD, ADD, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs. So, my local data. I live in a community named Cedar Springs, Michigan. We are a rural, blue-collar community just north of Grand Rapids. We have a population just over 3,500 in 2022. So I started by creating a survey. This survey had 10 questions. They were pretty quick, 2 or 3 answers that they could select from. I put this out on social media community pages, with the hopes that maybe I could get 10, 12, 15 people to reply. I ended up having just over 30, so I felt good about that. So this first question is, which of the following best describes your household? The blue is we can always afford balanced meals. The red is sometimes we can afford balanced meals. And the orange is we can never afford balanced meals. So as you can see, 67.7% of the community, or of the 32 people that responded, said that they can always afford balanced meals. Side note, I asked only families or households with children to fill this out. Cedar Springs is a rural blue-collar community. We have an average individual income of just over $29,000 annually, and the average annual household, so everyone living in a house, is $47,000. Which of the following statements best describes the amount of food in your house? Blue, always enough to eat. Red, sometimes not enough to eat. And orange, often not enough to eat. 93.8% said we always have enough to eat. The majority of households in Cedar Springs are dual incomed, married, white, non-Hispanic, and have at least a bachelor's degree. Which of the following is true for your household? We always have enough money for food in the blue. We sometimes have enough money for food in the red. And we never have enough money for food in the orange. 84.4% said we always have enough money for food. The poverty rate in Cedar Springs, Michigan in 2022 was 24.7%. Manufacturing is the largest industry. We have several large manufacturing plants that employ most of the community, followed by retail services. Meijer, Aldi, Family Farm and Home, fast food places, those are all places that we have in Cedar Springs. So looking back, what was most influential of this project? Well, I was surprised to learn that food insecurity is both a short-term and a long-term factor in development. However, the long-term impacts are not fully researched because a couple things. We don't want food insecurity to be a long-term thing. We want families, children to learn how to access that food, how to increase their budget so that they don't live in a food insecure home. And in the 80s, 90s, food insecurity wasn't researched well. So now that it is, we need to spend time doing the basic research so that in the future, this next generation can look back, compare, check back in with those people that were researched. The long-term impacts are not fully researched, but some data shows that once food becomes available for a child, it does not stop the previous damage that has already occurred. Think about that baby that's not being fed. If they don't have that foundational social emotional bond, they're never going to learn how to bond to another adult. And they may have dozens and dozens of relationship problems as teenagers and in adulthood. Food insecurity impacts all children in all domains of development. I was pretty naive. I thought, food insecurity only impacts physical development. You know, they get fed at school, they're fine. Well, I was wrong, and I am not ashamed to admit that. Gaining quick access to food is hard. The food assistance program in the United States is a tedious process, and there is a negative stigma attached that deters many eligible families from obtaining these benefits. First, this program is online. Think about that. If you can't afford food for your family, more than likely, you're not going to be able to provide or have access to the internet. You may not have access to a car to get to a library that has internet. You may not have a smartphone because buying a bowl of or a box of macaroni and cheese is more important than paying the phone bill. You get it? You see where that's a problem? Yep, we gotta fix that. There's also a negative stigma attached. Oh, they get food stamps. They sit on their bums at home. We need to fix that as a society. We need to understand that if you are a single parent, remember that statistic that in Cedar Springs, in a single income home, $29,000 a year, that is not enough. Not enough to pay a heat bill. Not enough to pay for gas. We need to help these families have access and understand that it is okay to get the food assistance programs. It also was influential that local communities such as Cedar Springs, rural communities, we don't have access to food pantries. So what are we going to do to fix this? How can we help these people, these children living in these communities? So here are some recommendations. I'd love to see some more long studies that come back to these children that were studied in their childhood. How did living in that food insecure home impact their choices as adults? Did they choose to go to college? Did they not have that choice? Did they choose to go in a profession that allowed them to help this problem? Do they suffer any long-term illnesses, physical illnesses, mental illnesses, emotional illnesses? What are they doing to help those in need? Do they see it as a problem today? How did they feel growing up? What do they remember from their personal experience? They're older now. They have more words, more vocabulary. They may be able to explain things differently now. Is there anything that stands out to them in terms of that experience? What would they have liked to seen done differently? Do they harbor any ill feelings on their caregivers? How did the lack of food impact their academics? Did they struggle in school? Did they like to go to school? These are all things that we can study by going back in time, researching those children that have already been studied. And lastly, while it's not something that is going to be easy to do, the food assistance program in the United States needs to be fixed. We need to have easy access with less paperwork, less internet access. Make this easier for everyone to access. And I'd also like to see an educational component with that teaches families how to budget for meals. If you only have $10, what would be the best foods to buy with that $10? So you'll go to the store and you buy those foods. How can you prepare them healthier? Those are all things that are easy, free to do. How will I use this information? First, I will use this information to share with other teachers in the early childhood center that I teach in. We are all teaching and serving families in Cedar Springs. We're all teaching families that are low income, at risk. They all meet at-risk factors. I'd love to continue the research at a local level. How can we provide quick, easy access to those foods in need? Cedar Springs, we don't have a food pantry. We don't have a place for families to go and get food. I just can't imagine what that must feel like for them. How can we start a food education program? A program that teaches budgeting, shopping for healthy foods, preparing those healthy meals. I know I can go to the grocery store and buy all the healthy stuff, but then I get home and that box of cookies looks way more easier to cook than that apple, or making that apple into applesauce so my children will eat it. Making families aware that they can do this. We can rally together to help them. So in Grand Rapids, which is the largest city in Kent County, there's a program called Kids Food Basket. Kids Food Basket provides a sack dinner, so a PB&J, a juice box, an apple, a cheese stick, whatever it may be, simple things like that, to students in urban districts such as Grand Rapids Public, Kentwood, Godfrey Lee, the urban districts close to their distribution center. So how can we expand this program to rural districts? I understand this is going to take money, this is going to take people, manpower, but it's so important to get this food in their bellies that we have to do something. And lastly, my biggest takeaway is that every student that comes to my classroom has a story, and all their stories are different. All their behaviors are different. And remembering that their behavior may not be related to a learning disability or cognitive disability, it may be because they are hungry. They feel hunger. So, my biggest takeaway is remembering to listen to their stories, gathering that information, listening to that information, listening to their story, figuring out how I can help them be the best that they can be. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing about your research projects.